begin. All right, so this is Texas State University, the undergraduate team, correct? All right, so let me just read you my script, even though you're not supposed to be reading. They gave this to me last night, so I will read. All right, my name is Ruth Kraft. I am the Uber judge for this afternoon, and in real life, I was a New York State Supreme Court Justice for 14 years, which means I'm a lawyer, and I'm now in private practice. So let me just read the instructions. In this part of the competition, you are taking on a fictional business identity, and you'll be assigning a fictional business identity as well to the three of us, to the three judges. Please make sure that we know who you are, and before you start, I've told you who I am. These two ladies will tell you who they are as well. All right? You will have 25 minutes, and there is an extra 5-minute cushion, should you need it, to describe the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem, and to recommend a solution that fulfills financial, ethical, and legal considerations. During this time, you will be uninterrupted. When you are finished, you will be on the hot seat, and all of us will ask you questions for 20 minutes. I will start, and then I'll turn it over to the other two judges. During the Q&A, both you and we will remain in character. After the Q&A, we'll take a little breather, and then we'll basically give you feedback about how well you did. I want you to keep some things in mind. Obviously, the ethical aspect, this is a business ethics competition, not a business law or a finance competition. The ethical aspects are the most important part. They should be described simply, practically, and in a common sense way. Using technical philosophical terminology or jargon, or argot, or legalese, or basing your argument on religious or theological grounds would be considered a serious weakness in the presentation. Similarly, reading your parts would be considered a big mistake, although certainly you can take a look at your notes. During the presentation, every member of the team must speak. No hand signals. Okay, so we're almost ready to begin. I'd like to have the other two judges introduce themselves, please.
Okay, Allison Howie. I'm with Entergy Corporation. I'm in-house counsel. I've practiced commercial litigation for about 18 years. A few years ago, I moved to the Ethics and Compliance section, which is also part of our legal department. And today, I'm managing counsel of information governance.
I'm Zoe Ng. I work for the Ethics and Compliance Initiative, and we're actually a nonprofit, and I'm part of the data research team.
All right, thank you. All right, I'm going to set the clocks to 30 minutes. Where would you like the time clock to be? Over here? Certainly. Okay, let's get going.
Okay, so.
And of course, mine isn't cooperating.
This is forward and then this is backwards. So
Here we go.
So that's it. So good afternoon. I apologize for the issue with or the confusion regarding our executive summaries. We are a consulting firm that's been hired by Johnson & Johnson to talk to you, the managing board for Coke. So we're speaking to Coca-Cola. Specifically, we're here to talk about Coke's association and sponsorship of an organization known as FIFA, which is, if you don't know it offhand, an organization that hosts, or organizes, an event known as the World Cup. The World Cup is essentially the most significant international competition in the sport of football. FIFA has recently come under a significant amount of fire because of particular ethical violations, and this has caused a number of companies, including Coca-Cola and Johnson & Johnson, to question their sponsorship. What we're seeking here today to convince you of is not simply that such sponsorship is poorly founded, but that you can go beyond that, and that a particular mode of change can be brought about for FIFA in order to make them a worthwhile investment. So Coca-Cola has a stated commitment to humanitarian values. This can be seen in their mission statement: to refresh the world, to inspire moments of optimism and happiness, and to create value and make a difference. Their commitment to particular values and to humanitarianism generally has given your organization particular standards that they need to meet in terms of who they associate with and in terms of the kinds of business practices that they endorse. Previously, for a significant amount of time, Coca-Cola has been a sponsor of FIFA. They're one of the longest running, and they're also one of the largest. Now, this sponsorship runs into the issue of these violations. FIFA has come under fire for corruption in their bidding process because of a lack of transparency in the way that they go about selecting host countries. So if you don't know, host countries are essentially selected to be the location where the World Cup occurs. And over the past several years, we have the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, the 2014 in Brazil, and the upcoming ones in 2018 in Russia and 2022 in Qatar. South Africa was notable for the introduction of FIFA courts, which were initially actually considered a positive addition because they promised swift justice. However, the severity of their decisions and the undue diligence they showed in the way that they prosecuted eventually caused an outcry, particularly amongst South Africans who felt like they were being persecuted by these courts. In Brazil, the stadiums that were constructed were, first of all, built in low-income areas. So a number of people were displaced simply to build these things. And Brazil ultimately didn't see a lot of significant benefit from hosting the World Cup. And it also created a significant amount of internal strife within their country. In terms of Russia, Russia has gained some degree of infamy now for having played poorly in the world stage in terms of their interactions with the Ukraine, as well as their history of human rights abuse in terms of LGBT individuals. And Qatar, almost most concerningly, has a very bad reputation, essentially as a slave state, where their colossal system violates workers' rights. Essentially, workers are required to stay there, aren't able to leave, and often aren't paid for the work that they do. This has been a history of poor decision-making, poor associations, and bad ethical practices in the countries that they, and in the inner workings of FIFA itself. Coke and Johnson & Johnson and a number of other companies have already come to the conclusion that continuing sponsorship of FIFA is at best questionable. However, what we want to suggest is a solution to these problems, which is a solidarity agreement. This solidarity agreement would essentially provide a framework for allowing these companies to work together in order to force change upon FIFA. And this change for FIFA would be regard its legal, economic, and ethical reforms within the way that the company itself functions and in its relations with others. And that this would consist not only in the organization itself, but the kinds of agreements that companies like Coca-Cola make with this organization. And that this would set a precedent in the world of sports for future sponsorships, the way in which people choose to go about funding an organization such as FIFA, which has such power and such international reach. So, having stated all this, to go over the nature of the solidarity agreement as well as the nature of the relationship between Coca-Cola and FIFA, Ms. Meyer, our legal consultant, will brief you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. My name is Jennifer Meyer, and I'm going to be talking to you about how signing this solidarity agreement can help strengthen your political capital. But before I talk about how the solidarity agreement can help you, I'm going to talk about how staying with FIFA in its current state can hurt your company. Okay, so what can Coca-Cola lose by staying with FIFA? First of all, and the biggest thing you can lose is your political capital. What I mean by your political capital is the amount of influence and goodwill you hold with fellow organizations and fellow legal entities. So this political capital goes a long way in funding the Coca-Cola Foundation, which is your main international philanthropic arm. In addition to this, your political capital goes a long way in aiding your legal legitimacy in negotiating with international governments and other fellow organizations, again relating to your Coca-Cola Foundation. And most importantly, a loss in political capital will lead to a loss in public trust, which as an international company who has these stated visions and goals, public trust is really important to you. Additionally, Coca-Cola has come out with stated visions and policies that you want to uphold. Specifically, you have the vision of partners. You want to nurture a winning network of customers and suppliers, and that together we can create mutual enduring value. Now, as we've explained, FIFA is obviously not a winning partner, and thereby you lose the value that you want to create. Additionally, you state that you as a company want to be a responsible citizen and that you want to make a difference by helping build and support sustainable communities. Now, as Mr. Johnson talked about with the stadiums in Brazil, FIFA has really not helped build these sustainable and supportive communities. You've also recently come out with a human rights policy. You state that the Coca-Cola Company respects human rights. It is committed to identify, prevent, and mitigate adverse human rights impacts resulting from or caused by our business activities before or if they occur through human rights due diligence and mitigation processes. Now, as we've stated, Qatar, the host country of the 2022 World Cups, has a long history of human rights violations and workers' rights violations. So if you stay with FIFA, you wouldn't really be adhering to this human rights policy that you have stated. Now, I really want to talk about the Solidarity Agreement itself. We have three main provisions of this agreement. First of all, members of this agreement promise, of course, not to sign any contract or sponsorship with FIFA until our certain ethical, financial, and legal requirements have been met. Joining sponsors can leave this agreement at any time and incur no financial or legal cost. And signing the Solidarity Agreement does not require any sort of signing or exit fee. I also really want to stress that this agreement is legally non-binding. It won't have any impact on any of Coca-Cola's other business ventures. It doesn't violate any Georgia law, which is where the Coca-Cola headquarters is situated, and it doesn't violate any federal law. Now, in the if FIFA does meet our requirements and Coca-Cola does want to re-sign an agreement with FIFA to sponsor them in the future, that sponsorship will hold a morals clause. Now, this morals clause will hold FIFA to certain behavioral and ethical standards that we will set. And if FIFA violates these standards, Coca-Cola has the right to terminate its contract with FIFA, and it has the right to receive 50% of all sponsorship monies paid to FIFA. Now, to talk more about this sort of financial aspect of the Solidarity Agreement, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Nipper.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming today. I'm going to be talking about how to maintain financial assets in this situation, how it just makes sense. As a previous big name World Cup sponsor and big name of the World Cup and FIFA, we have weight. We have weight to control financially how FIFA can act. We're some of the longest running sponsors. Coke is the second longest sponsor ever of FIFA. Their name carries a ton of weight, a weight we can use to force FIFA to become more ethically sound and to right their ship. A part of our credo is to put the needs and well-being of our customers first before profit. One that has helped our revenue and our brand image grow tremendously, and one we think FIFA can benefit from. We think applied right, it can help them steer their ship to more financially stable waters, but first we need to take a look at what is making the sea so rough. These are FIFA's partners. Partner is the highest level of sponsorship that FIFA offers. These were the 6 partners for the 2014 World Cup in Brazil. Since then, as we can see here, 4 out of the...
Technology is a wonderful thing.
Try to scroll down on the
Yeah,
computer.
can you do it on the
Try
computer?
the space bar.
Hit down or, there you go.
Perfect. As you can see, 4 out of the 6 below sponsors have left the organization. Why is this? This is because FIFA's brand image has gone down. Brand image is a very important thing to your bottom line as an organization. When you have a good brand image, people feel more comfortable with your products. When they feel more comfortable with your products, they're willing to buy it. More buys, more sales, more revenue. Their lack of morals and ethics is what has caused their brand image to decline. This has resulted in a high-risk situation for our sponsors, like ourselves and yourselves, that can no longer be good for business. When you see a figure with accusations of corruptions and moral ethics violations in society, it generally turns out to be a negative in the red, in the bottom line, and it's generally not good to be seen with that person. So as I stated before, FIFA's actions have resulted in our customers feeling uncomfortable with our products and in turn would decline sales. You yourself say in page 18 of your financial report, our success depends on the ability to maintain our brand image of existing products, build brand image for new products and brand extensions, and maintain our corporate image. This is a direct violation of that clause. Another point we have is that the return on investment for sponsoring FIFA no longer justifies the cost. There are plenty more opportunities such as the Club Cup that you could sponsor and would not nearly have the risk that sponsoring FIFA does. There is, however, a great opportunity in this situation. By signing on an agreement, we not only draw a line in the sand as a sponsor, we hold FIFA accountable. This agreement is a risk-free investment. There's no major downside to signing this agreement other than to say, hey FIFA, we don't like what you're doing, we need you to stop, we'd like to sponsor you, but right now you are forcing our hand financially because your brand image is going to hurt us. It's going to hurt the bottom line. This move, in turn, would lead to positive PR. Positive PR in that we are fighting corruption and morally ethical charges on an international scale. Not only would we be fighting the charge, by signing this agreement, we say we want to present those who are in the wrong with a solution. By showing that we want to present a solution and going above and beyond, this will result in even more public relations in a positive manner and an increase in brand management. And like I said earlier, an increase in brand management would be good for business. In conclusion, there's no denying that FIFA has had a harmful effect on a sponsor. I'm sorry, let me restart. In conclusion, there's no denying that FIFA's harmful brand image is terrible for business as a sponsor. We would like to see FIFA, change their ways, but right now, from the financial aspect, it just doesn't make sense to continue sponsoring them. By signing a solidarity agreement, we not only make a financial move that is sound for us, but would result in things such as brand image, public relations, and positive effects on our bottom line. Clearly, the investment in this case is to sign the solidarity agreement. As I just stated, it has several positive effects. This is a business decision on an international scale, and one I feel Coca-Cola and Johnson & Johnson cannot afford to make the wrong decision. By holding FIFA more accountable to their ethical standards and moral violations that they are violating, we will also reap a financial profit. To talk more about the moral ethical violations that they are violating, I have my colleague, Mr. Johnson, here to talk to you.
Thank you, Mr. Nicker. So, ensuring ethical standards. In terms of business ethics, we're talking about a field of business in which there's a presumption of exchange. People don't participate in business if they don't intend to reach some sort of positive sum from such participation. Now, it's possible for a company or an actor generally to gain a negative reputation as someone who doesn't often give you a positive benefit from your activities. And communities where such a reputation is known will tend to not want to do business with those actors. So in order to continue doing profitable business, you want to maintain the perception of a positive image. And achieving that is best done by adhering to a set of ethical standards which have to help to promote positive sum benefits for all involved, even if it doesn't necessarily have immediate positive consequences for those actors. So when we talk about an organization such as FIFA has been shown to be a bad actor. And doing business with them could demonstrate that we have too little concern for the kinds of impact FIFA will have on those places where a corporation such as yourselves, Coca-Cola, or Johnson & Johnson would like to do business. And in such, with such an organization, therefore, ensuring that while the marketing opportunities that such an organization provide are significant, that damage to a person's reputation needs to be fixed by a restructuring of the organization itself, and such needs to occur with a set of ethical standards that will point the organization in a better direction. So in order to do this, we're going to keep into account particular forms of resources that a company has account of, finances, workers, political access. But among those resources are these ethical standards that we've been discussing. And as a framework for discussing these ethical standards, we're going to use virtue ethics. The particular virtues that we want to discuss, these business virtues, are transparency, toughness, fairness, and responsibility. Transparency in FIFA's operations will ensure that their inner workings are trustworthy, such that a particular corporation can feel that they have some degree of, some notion of whether or not the activities will have a positive benefit for them, whether or not corruption is occurring within the organization itself. Toughness will ensure that FIFA doesn't allow corruption or simply poor thinking to manifest itself into the poor selection of a country that they do business with. Fairness ensures that their activities don't unduly damage whatever particular businesses that they're interacting with. And responsibility goes into the way in which an organization such as FIFA has committed itself to a particular set of goals. And these goals, the promotion of sport, they require of it a particular end. And being pointed at this end means that the policies of the organization needs to be organized in a particular way. So to actualize these virtues, we have a set of suggestions. These suggestions would be the requirements set forward by the Solidarity Agreement before any signer of it would agree to do business again with FIFA. These requirements would be the creating and enforcing an internal code of ethics. These ethics would be centered around the humanitarian impact of the organization itself. So the way in which FIFA's operations with Brazil significantly displaced people. The inclusion of a morality clause, which was discussed in our legal section, which would help to ensure that this ethical standard is maintained, because businesses could leave if they found that it wasn't the case that it was being fulfilled. Publishing the host country's offers. Part of the bidding process in terms of the way FIFA operates is that countries provide a bid, and FIFA is able to select from amongst these bids. The process has been subject to either corruption or ineptitude, due to the fact that in their selection, they've selected countries such as Qatar, which have embroiled them in the ethical situation that they're currently in. So publishing this set of bids that they received after the fact will ensure that people will be able to review them and come to a conclusion themselves whether or not FIFA had made a good choice and whether or not that choice was fair to the countries that they ultimately chose. And investigating into the current accusations of corruption. This needs to be stopped the way that it's happening within the organization itself. It doesn't allow for a trusting and transparent relationship with such an organization. In sum, therefore, we've discussed our three parts, and the signing of the Solidarity Agreement would help to put pressure on FIFA in order to bring about these particular or other suggested changes to the organization, and that this would open up essentially a market for Coke and for any other particular company that was going to do business with it. I hope this has been persuasive, and I thank you for your time.
Okay. I have so many questions for you all. Just trying to think of to whom I should direct them. First of all, why is Johnson & Johnson vaguely coming in and out of this equation? You've alluded to J&J a few times, but the bulk of the presentation is about Coke, and we're the Coke board.
So Johnson & Johnson, among a number of other companies, have already agreed to not sign back on with FIFA. This would include...
but they weren't on the list, so in other words, they're not one of the...
They're not one of the major contributors.
Okay.
Now, Johnson & Johnson has a history of an ethical high standing. And so...
We've heard many J&J presentations over the years, I must tell you.
So our selection of them was on the basis that they would be a company that would likely be interested in bringing about these types of reform to FIFA, and that they might be the type
so
to organize
So you're referencing them to us as the Coca-Cola board?
Yes.
Okay.
If I may add, to add on what he's saying earlier, while Johnson & Johnson is not one of the 6 partners that I mentioned earlier, they are a second-tier sponsor of the World Cup.
All right. Here's my main question for you. Clearly, there are things that FIFA does as an entity, or perhaps FIFA's employees do if they're on the take and on the make in these third world countries in particular, that I get is problematic. But to a certain degree, your rubric here, your solidarity agreement, aren't you holding this entity accountable, financially accountable, morally accountable for the actions of sovereign states? I mean, if the United States can't pressure Russia into behaving itself with Pussy Riot and all sorts of other human rights and LGBT violations, why do you think that we would be successful at doing that?
I believe I can answer financially.
Okay.
One of the most powerful things you can do to convince a company is to hit them where it hurts. It's bottom line.
Hit a country? Do you think
Not hit a country, an organization.
Okay, I understand that. But so my problem here is if we say to FIFA, look, we'll agree to go in and sponsor. And by the way, we can pull the plug on you at any time. And I believe that the consequence is maybe a 50% loss. Okay? One, is that going to destroy the World Cup if a bunch of us pull out because a sovereign state, such as Russia, is a bad actor, and that sovereign state's president has tremendous chutzpah, he does something, or he's running things in a way that FIFA itself can't control?
What we're saying is FIFA's selection of these countries is questionable, and we're not asking FIFA to take a tremendously active part in changing these countries. We're asking FIFA to have better judgment in choosing these countries.
Well, didn't the International Olympic Committee, because I wanted to get to that, didn't the International Olympic Committee also select Russia?
Yes.
Okay. Have you looked at the IOC's contracting rules? Do they also contain such a clause or a solidarity agreement?
I don't believe so. We have not looked too greatly into that.
So since we are one of the major sponsors of the Olympics, in fact, the Atlanta Olympics was in our backyard, why would we create a double standard by saying to the International Olympic Committee, no problem, you have an Olympics in China, you have an Olympics in Russia, among many other places, but those two notably that have significant human rights violations, and we're dealing with you, but when it comes to football, well, we're going to have a different moral standard. Aren't we being hypocritical?
So I think that there's a number of points to this. First of all, I think you can point to a more significant history of abuse with FIFA, right? So we're starting with Brazil, we're starting with South Africa, we're talking about Brazil, and then we're also talking about Russia and Qatar. I think that that history is, and particularly the allegations of corruption currently, have brought these issues to light, right? So this is a problem of debate today. If there had been as much emphasis and much outcry in the public towards the Olympics, I think it would have been worthwhile for
But the three of us are older than you are, and I'm certainly the oldest person in the room. Actually, I am the oldest person in the room. It gets scarier and scarier. And I can tell you that Berlin 1936, China, Russia, there were just the same issues arose. It's not any different. Brazil had a lot of financial issues in terms of the World Cup. I visited South Africa the year of the World Cup when they were getting ready. Are we in a way punishing third world countries because they don't have their act together as much as in the first world, that they're inherently corrupt? But those are countries where people idolize football, correct?
I think, and this is a point that I wanted to mention. You talk about whether or not a company or an organization such as FIFA would be able to actually allow any sort of change. One of the things that I wanted to mention in Brazil is that they actually effected a law change. They were effectively able to lobby Brazil to change its laws.
Who's that?
FIFA.
FIFA
was able to lobby to change laws in Brazil with regard to making it legal to drink beer in stadiums, so that one of their major sponsors, which one was it? Budweiser. Was able to sell. So if an organization such as FIFA probably has, in terms of their ability to capture the hearts and the minds of people, more power than even an organization such as the Olympics. So I think with that, a greater power, there can be an argument for greater responsibility. But beyond that, I think that it might be the case that we need to be concerned about the Olympics, and that is another presentation that we could come and give you on another day.
Why would FIFA, notwithstanding that nobody can disagree with the solidarity notion, the solidarity agreement, lofty principles, who's going to say, no, these are terrible, other than maybe Vladimir Putin. Why should FIFA put itself at risk of financial collapse by signing agreements with companies whereby if something happens in that sovereign state, if a president gets elected, and I'm thinking of Venezuela in particular, which has lots of political problems, where suddenly the whole World Cup can collapse because of a third-party actor. Why would they agree to that? Wouldn't they be better off finding other sponsors and not exposing them to the fact that they might not have a World Cup, that they might be legally responsible for money that they don't have to pay back? Right?
Well, it would be more financially, it would be a financial solution just to go find another sponsor. Not many businesses are going to want to be seen with someone who's been held in such a light. For example, with the Donald Sterling organization that just happened with the Los Angeles Clippers, as soon as this report came out, nobody wanted to be associated with them. Players were going on strike, players were threatening to not play the next season. Nobody wanted to be associated with the games.
How are you going to get the money back? In other words, if we give you part of the money, the sponsorship money, and then there's a consequence, something happens in Russia, and we say, we're not going forward with you because there was a scandal where somebody from FIFA was on the take with someone in the Russian administration. Okay, you've already spent this money, I'm assuming, on infrastructure and development. So now where does that leave me as Coca-Cola? I'm going to have worse. In order to enforce if I enforce the agreement, there's going to be publicity all over the fact that I'm now enforcing a legal contract that I'm entitled to enforce, and I've now destroyed because everybody in these countries is going to say, now we're never drinking Coke again. And if I don't enforce it, then I'm a total wimp. I mean, then how do we explain to our board that we went into this lofty principle, but we're really not enforcing it because of the financial consequences? Don't we lose either way?
Are you referring to the morals clause? Where
Yes.
they resign? Okay.
Yes.
So specifically, the morals clause relates to ethics within the inner workings of FIFA. So let's say they picked this, really ethical, upstanding country to host the World Cup, and once they had already decided to host the World Cup, something happens in that country. That wouldn't violate the morals clause. That wouldn't be FIFA doing something unethical. That would be the country doing something unethical, and that problem would have to be dealt with within the parameters of that situation. That wouldn't be a reason to violate or a reason to take away that sponsorship.
Okay, so if FIFA has a contract with a company in Russia, and Russia's probably not a good example of this, Qatar, and it subsequently learns that notwithstanding a legal agreement that they're supposed to be paying the workers the minimum wage and not supposed to be making them into slaves, that they've in fact done it, okay? But there's money at stake. You're saying that we could then pull out.
FIFA doesn't have a direct hand in paying these building companies or paying these workers.
Who does?
That's all up to the country. We're criticizing FIFA's choice to give the World Cup to Qatar, where they know that this country has these human rights violations.
Well, short of limiting the World Cup to Western Europe, the United States and our neighbor to the north, seriously,
Right.
or Japan, how can you possibly, in realistic terms, not expect corruption or unfair labor practices? We have lots of unfair labor practices in this country as well.
That's true. We're hoping that as part of the bidding process, not necessarily major changes, but changes within the country could be made. So a provisional change in labor laws for, building up to the World Cup could be made. These of course,
Provisional meaning after the World Cup they go away and we go back to business as usual?
Well, because we don't want to impede on the cultural, the culture of the country, because this kafala, while it does violate human rights and it does violate workers' rights, it's part of their culture. And
Wait, so you're saying that if we could have provisional contracts or provisional terms that for X period of time, such and such human rights laws or employment laws, according to the ILO, which is the labor arm of the United Nations, should be upheld. And the minute we're out of the picture, it's like back to business as usual, and we're going to associate ourselves with this? What does that look like for us as a
Is
public
FIFA the world
matter?
police? I mean, does FIFA need to sit there and require that a country change its laws in perpetuity? I mean, you're talking about
I'm asking you the question because seriously,
I don't believe so.
Because seriously, in employment law, we're now holding multiple actors accountable as joint venturers.
We as in who?
In the United States, the courts are holding multiple actors accountable as joint venturers. Imagine what would happen if an employee in Russia decides to try to go to court and sue not only the Russian government or whatever Russian company is involved, but then gets the brilliant idea, let's sue FIFA, let's sue Coca-Cola, let's sue every sponsor because they're integrally involved in the development of this. Maybe it's the worker that builds the Coca-Cola pavilion. What is that going to look like for us? I mean, what are you saying?
I think that FIFA ultimately is, we talked about responsibility as my virtue, right? I don't think FIFA is responsible for everything that occurs within the country. It's responsible for ensuring that the way that games are carried out are in accord with ethical standards. And I think that's the most that we can ask of them. So,
But didn't you just say that Qatar was a big issue for you because Qatar is known to have human rights violations?
Right.
I mean, isn't there an asynchrony here?
So if they select a country like Qatar, a requirement of that selection needs to be that those kinds of human rights violations won't occur. That
For FIFA purposes.
for FIFA purposes.
Okay. Ladies, do you have questions?
Yeah, I'm just, a couple of things, like what type of dollars are we talking about when they have the 6 major investors? So what kind of money, just, I'm curious, like how much are we talking about? Because if 4 of them have pulled out, so how much of a loss in terms of revenue? How much, what are the numbers? I'm just curious.
So, after going over FIFA's 2014 financial report, they reported that the reserves, after FIFA operates in a 4-year period, they use their finances from the World Cup to fund all 4 years in between. In the recent 2014 World Cup, they had $335 million in profit. This came off of 90% was about TV, marketing, sales, all that stuff. 90% of it came from marketing, TV, all that. That would be, I don't know what 90% of 335 is off the top of my head, but that's multiple hundreds of millions of dollars lost if we were to take that away from them, saying by pulling out sponsorship.
See, I'm curious if they're really who's gonna lose what? I mean, I'm kind of shocked to hear that they're making that much money, because certainly the Olympics aren't making that kind of money. So what type of dollars are we investing? I just don't know as from our company.
By signing the agreement, we don't ask the company to,
Are we not putting up any money?
we're not putting any money up front. We're asking them to carry out actions rather than buying an ad, or we're asking them to oppose FIFA, and by not doing something with their set, rather than we are, hey, buy something, give us money to run a campaign against them.
So I'm just wondering if that's enough of a step for us to say, okay, we're not, Coca-Cola's not going to participate, Visa pulls out. I don't know if that's enough to really change FIFA, the corporate culture. But my next question is have the waters been tested? Like, is FIFA on board with this? Has anyone talked to them? I mean, are they open? Because they're not open to negotiation. I mean, I know they're not going to be part of the solidarity agreement, but certainly they may choose, they could easily say, well, we don't want the money, or we don't want the sponsorship. I'm just wondering how badly it would really hurt them.
Right.
Because I've seen the numbers of people, I mean, in Europe, people are going to go to those games no matter whether we sponsor the World Cup or not.
Right. Right now, sort of everything is kind of up in the air. These all sponsorships ended in December 2014. So now what we're talking about as far as people ending their sponsorships, it's them deciding not to re-sign with FIFA. So these decisions, because they've been so recent, I guess there hasn't really been much backlash or much conversation about it in terms of, I guess, FIFA commenting on these sponsorship pullouts.
If I could add to that, FIFA's not making their monies by sales of tickets. They're making their money by sales of marketing and ad rights. If we take that away from them, like I said before, we're hurting 90% of their revenue. 90% of 335 is going to put them in a loss. And although they are a nonprofit organization, or claim to be, they obviously care about the finances. They can, with that type of loss over a 4-year period, they would not be able to sustain themselves for the next 4 years.
Can they make it up by raising the television rights, what they sell the rights
If no one's going to buy the rights because they don't want to be with a simple company, they can't make the revenue off the sales.
No, I mean, why can't they just do it with NBC or CBS or all the other international companies that air this thing, because it generates tremendous viewership?
So part of the issue here is that they've already sold the rights for the Russia games and the Qatar games. If they wanted to sell further than that, perhaps they could do something there. But part of the problem is that they're becoming such bad news that a lot of these types of places don't want to do business with them, and particularly with the Qatar games. They had to basically make a deal with, I believe it was Fox, because there was an issue. It was because they were going to have to move the time of the games from the summer into the winter, because it's just so hot in Qatar, which was a show of either ineptitude or corruption on the part of the FIFA officials for selecting that. So the sale of rights for the broadcasting, it runs down by country, so different different groups will pay different things. But this process by which these companies sign on to the solidarity agreement, each company that signs on to the solidarity agreement isn't paying for visa, which drives down the worth of those rights. And at the same time, if the solidarity agreement is a public thing, that on top of that will continue to erode their brand. And that, again, drives down the worth of their rights.
Okay, now I understand that first world countries might seek to demand a solidarity agreement, but do you really believe that countries like Venezuela, I guess I can't say Cuba because now suddenly we're friendly with them after all these years, countries in Africa, countries in Asia, are going to buy onto this thing? And aren't there intrinsic companies, not the U.S. companies, but Korean Air or something?
What are those companies
Are
going to
they
be able to
capable
pay?
of stepping up and stepping up financially?
They might be able to buy the rights, but they're not going to have the kind of financial clout that a company like Coca-Cola is going to have. And they're going to have to scramble. And those companies are going to have a good bargaining position because they know that these other companies won't be buying. So there's going to be a diminishing return here. The more companies that sign on to the solidarity agreement, the better the bargaining position of those other companies.
Isn't it the opposite? Isn't it the fact that if we don't sign on and J&J doesn't sign on, but there are a lot of third world companies out there in China who are, I've been to China, billions and billions of people. Chinese companies may come in and say, you know what, we're going to get a bargain deal out of these people, specifically because the Americans are not.
A bargain deal. And how is FIFA going to be able to use that bargain deal money to continue to fund the games?
By having enough of those bargain deals to make up for it.
Perhaps, but I think then that degrades the price of it even more. What you're discussing here is possible, but I think it's unlikely, particularly because of the negative PR that they'll receive from the kind of move, the solidarity agreement.
I mean, I understand the negative PR in the first world. What I'm saying to you is, have you ever been to the third world? And why do you think why are we perceiving this as a first world issue only?
I'm just going to add something. In Brazil, there's a lot of backlash against the World Cup being hosted there. There were protests, there were a lot of riots. They didn't want, even though Brazil is known for, religiosity of soccer, they were against, right, they were against the World Cup being in Brazil.
Were they against the World Cup, or were they against the deals that their regime struck with the companies?
Well, I guess it would be the latter, but I mean, that's where the corruption of FIFA comes in. Because FIFA made these bad deals with the country, these people were upset. And I feel like it's not just the people, it's also those companies in those third world countries.
Many stadiums were built by poverty-stricken favelas. And when asked about, what was going on, one quote sticks out in my mind. One quote of a worker said, somebody's making a profit off this whole thing, and it's not the country. The country doesn't really benefit in the long run.
So the only benefit that the countries get essentially is the prestige. People increasingly, even though they still love soccer, are getting frustrated with FIFA and don't want the games to come to their countries. And companies are increasingly feeling as though they can't pay in. And companies such as Coca-Cola are already considering simply not renewing their contracts with FIFA, even though they have the significant financial benefit. What we're asking them is to go one step further. We're not asking them to stop paying and sign the solidarity agreement. They're already leaning towards not re-signing. Companies like Johnson & Johnson, companies like Visa, I believe Sony, a lot of these companies already aren't planning on signing on. The solidarity agreement is just essentially a very cheap, efficient way to put pressure on Visa so that potentially in the future they could re-sign. It's a win-win for them.
I'd actually like to ask a question. So you mentioned briefly an internal code of ethics. Can you describe that in a little bit more depth?
The internal code of ethics for Johnson & Johnson, or?
You mentioned one related to the moral clause, I believe.
Right. With the moral clause, I think.
Should I? In terms of ethical considerations, right? We want this focus on humanitarianism, and it's particularly not violating human rights in the particular actions of whatever FIFA does. So the code of ethics would be somewhat negotiable, but it would focus on the idea that whenever FIFA takes a bid from a particular country, they won't select that bid if that bid would have a negative impact on the people that live there, right? So if they're building it right next to the favelas and they're having to kick people out, and that's going to cause riots, and if that can be seen as there's a reasonable chain of events from selecting that bid, then FIFA should consider that negative chain of events as part of the cost, part of the bid, and detracting from the favorability of the bid itself.
How do you quantify that? I mean, unless you're in Mars, seriously, or in an area that's like the Gobi Desert, where there aren't any, very few people, how can you not have anything of this magnitude that will not have some negative impact on a certain element of the population?
Do you want to?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, how is it possible, other than the Gobi Desert or on Mars, to have, or the moon, to have a situation that will not have a negative impact on on some group of people? How do you quantify that?
We're not saying this agreement will completely eliminate it. We're saying FIFA's not only not trying to reduce that, they're actually adding to it.
Yeah, but I'm trying to understand. If I've got country A and country B, and I'm looking for, I mean, we're a board, we deal in numbers, right? How do we quantify the effect of building of a stadium in country A versus building it in country B, or the potential positives and or negatives of tourism on country A or B? How are you going to break that down other than in very subjective terms?
The country deals with the building of the stadiums. FIFA and Coke and other sponsors don't have.
Well,
I mean, FIFA has set guidelines for stadiums and stadium use, but they don't. They really just have like an approve or disapprove.
Right, but I'm parroting your language.
Right.
Negative impact on the country or the people. So if in Rio, you take a favela, I don't know if you've ever been to Rio, but it's really quite dramatic. The slums are, you literally can get a hotel like this and see the slum right outside the window. Okay, is it a negative impact to tear down a slum, to build a stadium, so long as you build housing elsewhere for these people, because they're living in the most wretched conditions? How are you?
So quantifying that is difficult. Quantifying that is something that Coca-Cola specifically as a company has actually been pretty well. They have a report, which I've only read parts of, that it deals with this quantifying these particular humanitarian concerns and the branding issues that come along with that. But specifically with regards to the way it would work in this particular agreement, it's going to come down to a consideration, okay, well, we're going to build these stadiums. Does the country, which would include this as part of the bid, do they build housing for them elsewhere? What will be the cost of building the stadium itself? What will the stadium be able to use, which was a significant concern with many of the stadiums, is that the stadiums weren't, they were built incredibly large to such an extent that the local communities couldn't use them. And you have to consider all of that money essentially as waste. And what you can do is you can look at the way that waste ultimately piles up, and you can compare it to the way in which the country, or what degree of income that the country expects to make from the hosting of the games. And if it seems as though that is likely to be a negative sum, then that would be a contract that FIFA probably shouldn't accept. Does that make sense?
On what time frame, though? Are we talking about income in a year, income in 5 years, income in 10 years? What's your rubric there?
That would probably have to be negotiated. I don't know. I could see.
Well, wouldn't you need to apply that same standard to each country?
Yes, it would need to become a standard part of FIFA's procedures.
Do you have any other questions, or? Okay. All right. So let's move on to the feedback. As you can see, I was the Judge Judy of the court. I'm torturing you like the devil. I have to say that I think you should have kept J&J out of this completely and just focused on Coke, because it was very confusing. We're the Coke board. frankly, unless, you wanted to refer to a decision made by another company and move on. Every company has its own mission, has its own perception, and I just thought it really, really muddled the waters. I think your graphics are very, very good, and I have to tell you that the rubric you set up, the notion of the solidarity agreement, the way that you put up those graphics, I thought were outstanding. I really do. I think you created this great structure, and then honestly, I don't think you followed through because you couldn't answer a lot of the questions. A lot of it was amorphous. It was very difficult for me to understand where the accountability. We're giving the countries a pass. We're anointed FIFA for its dealings. They're not perceiving things in terms of the potential benefit to the country or the people, which could be perceived on a variety of different levels. I will tell you, I went to South Africa 6 months before the World Cup. The esprit de corps that it generated internally in the country was amazing. I'm trying to remember the name of that horn. Venezuela. I mean, it was just amazing. I mean, they were blessed. South Africa, having the reputation of apartheid, a lot of people felt that having the World Cup there sort of legitimized them. They got tremendous publicity about the development of the country that could result in a lot of business coming in. There were a lot of positives to it. So I had a lot of trouble about FIFA somehow being accountable for the actions of third parties, particularly the sovereign states. And I wasn't quite sure that this framework was really going to be of any consequence. It particularly troubled me that if we are, as a company, as a board, going into the IOC and because we're one of the big sponsors in the world of the Olympics, and we're not holding them to these standards, and suddenly we're turning around and pointing the finger at FIFA and saying, no, we can't do business with you. This is such a negative. There's so many ethical violations, and shame on us, because that's probably the largest double standard I've heard of recently. So I had a lot of trouble with this. I also want to say, in terms of presentation, do not turn around and look at your screen. Okay, we can see the screen, but you should be looking at us. Never, ever look at the screen. If you have to have notes or have the things on the screen in front of you on little cards, that is great, but when you look back, it's not something you ever want to see in a business meeting. I also have to say that I think you need, and I said this to the team before, the most effective way to begin is by introducing all three of you to us. I was looking at this trying to figure out who's who, except for Jennifer, because that spoke for itself. I had no idea who was speaking until you then, it got turned over to you and they said James. And then I was thinking, okay, who's Nestor? Where is he? So I think you really need to do that to set a foundation for yourselves at the beginning, to set a structure, introduce yourselves, be very clear as to what your mission is going to be, and then to follow through on it. It's a very tough problem. The minute you get it, every time, I've been doing this now, this is my 12th year, I've seen hundreds of these presentations. Any presentation that involves a third-party political actor becomes that much harder to achieve. It's just much, much harder when you're dealing with the business and the public, or a legal consequence, but you're dealing with third-party states. I think it makes the case much harder to prove.
It's funny you say that, because first of all, you picked a really difficult topic. I love soccer. I played soccer for my college, but I was really what was just said, because you're dealing with the ethics of FIFA, but at the same time, and also you're dealing with the ethics of foreign countries, host countries, but yet your presentation is directed towards a corporate board. So I'm looking at it, what are our ethical considerations, our business ethics as well. So I think it's difficult. I really think you picked a tough topic. And just so, if you're thinking about doing this again, I think for other teams, when they were focused on a company and they were focused on the ethics of that company or the business implications or the financial or legal implications, I think they had an easier time. I think that's why the questions, let me tell you, I'll just say that was a grilling.
This is why he brings me back.
And but you stayed calm, you stayed poised, You stayed professional. And I actually felt for you up there. But let me say, I thought, and
It's nothing compared to
I've been
what I
through
did
it by
before.
many judges. I'm amazed at of everybody here, and especially your ages. I am so impressed that you can get up at your age, and it's not an easy thing to do. To get up, to give a presentation. This is not a difficult situation. I mean, this is a difficult situation. It's not an easy situation. I think you did a very good job. I can tell you were a little nervous, but you know what? Even though when someone grills you, sometimes you lose the nerve. So stay calm, because it almost helps you lose. It's unnerving, but at the same time, it helps you lose that nervousness. And I'm sorry, I don't remember your name.
Sean Johnson.
You're very passionate about this, and but I saw your coach. Stay calm, stay focused, stay poised, stay on point. And so I thought you did a good job. I thought you had some things working against you. I think your topic really worked against you. It made your job that much harder to do, because certainly you're very capable of giving the presentation. You learned the material. I know you didn't learn this last night. Obviously you've been working on this for quite some time. PowerPoints, all I can say is anytime you're going to use electronic equipment, always go in and test it. There was a little glitches today, and I haven't said this because it hasn't really come up, but you should always go in ahead of time, a day ahead, an hour ahead. Make sure everything runs smoothly, because you're never going to know what's going to unnerve you. So that is actually, what happened today is actually a really good lesson for the rest of your life. Don't ever go in and assume, oh, you're at the Lowe's Hotel, everything's going to be working perfectly, or the IT person. Make sure, as I would say, you have a piano burner. Because electronics don't always work, and so if you only have an electronic piano burner and the electricity goes out, you have to be able to adjust. So just for what it's worth. But I thought you did a good job. Yeah, you should be proud of yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Overall, you seemed very prepared and calm, and it seemed like you knew what you were talking about. I think a lot of the difficulties really were due to the topic. Again, it's I think you didn't quite get into the details of some of the things that might have been helpful, which is difficult because what details do you tell us about every single country that could possibly host the World Cup? And so I think that kind of, I would have liked to see more of just telling us the details of why us as a Coke board, also making sure we knew it up front and could understand the situation between Johnson & Johnson and that we are Coke, but understanding the details legally and financially and ethically for us as Coke, because humanitarian, I think you kind of put in there that our mission statement, Coca-Cola cares about humanitarianism, but our business ethics, I mean, as a board, I don't know that not that we don't care, but we don't care. That's not our job. And so I think it's a tough sell. And I think especially one thing that I kind of picked up, but you didn't fully lay this straight out there, is that we've already, it sounded like, made a decision that we are not going to re-sign, correct? So I think you could have kind of put it into a least amount of harm, least cost sort of, this is something you can do that will not have any detriment to your company because you've already made this side, as opposed to, it was put into this very proactive statement of, you're going to go into this solidarity agreement, it's going to be all these things, as opposed to more of a, you can also sign this and then you can benefit from it later. I think kind of framing it a little bit differently would have helped you. And definitely, I think looking at the PowerPoint was a little off-putting, but also just kind of remember, not just not looking at the PowerPoint or looking at your notes, but looking at us. And then when you're not speaking and you're sitting at that table, we can still see you. That's something I've noticed a couple of other groups sometimes forget too, is that pay attention to what's going on. If you look like you're zoned out, we do notice that.
Yeah, I have to say, some of the best winning cases, to pick up on what Zoe just said, is narrow your case. So if you had said the issue before us is whether we will sponsor in 2022 in Qatar, Because Russia already, we've seen Russia in the Olympics. If you had taken Qatar and focused on human rights violations with regard to workers, with regard to foreign workers, and is that something that we can buy into as Coca-Cola? Can we be a change agent in that regard? And if the argument is, yes, we can be a change agent, but just for FIFA, but then afterwards they can go back to doing whatever the heck it is, you created this enormous ethical dilemma on my part that, could I ever agree to this, knowing that that it's fine to do it for everybody else afterwards. I mean, I just thought you created more moral hazard in that one sentence than needed to happen. But if you had focused your case, you would have been able to be much more specific. And the more specificity, the stronger you feel when I start going at you, because you would have had the data about Qatar available already. You would have known what human rights initiatives are going on in Qatar now. We've got 7 years. What can we do to influence that? What's our timetable? What's our plan for influencing? What's the drop dead date by which we have to make a decision as to whether we're going to be a sponsor? Do we set a deadline and say, if not by that date, then we're not there? Or do we seek incremental change? I mean, I think your rationale here, your agreement was so strong that you could have then built into that agreement and set up a chronology that would have been very effective for you.
I have one more comment. When you use a PowerPoint, there are different reasons that you use it. There are different messages that you want to convey. I think there's a really good story here. So to me, you could have used your PowerPoint to tell a story. And what you really want to do is you want to invoke our emotions. Like, you want us to get as upset about FIFA and what they're doing as you are. So sometimes you start with that storytelling. And it's almost like the once upon a time and tell the story of FIFA and show some of the atrocities. And like I told another panel, I don't want to see the blood and gore, but a lot of times emotion may be the only thing sometimes that drives our decision. I mean, yes, we're a board. I've been on several panels that were board. And so, yes, we're driven by financial concerns, but anytime you can reach someone's emotions, that also, they make decisions based on emotions. So if we are so upset about the atrocities or what's going on in some of the host countries that FIFA has awarded these contracts to, use your PowerPoint to tell the story through pictures. And then you can get into details in the graphics. So you can always transition, but it's nice when you can start with a story and you can draw people in and you can play upon their emotions. I think you get a much better audience. But you know what? My gosh, y'all, what, in your 20s? You're doing great, This is just the beginning.
And also take this into consideration. The teams that have done the best historically are the ones who go back and look at their ethics presentation, because tomorrow you're limited only to the ethics, not to the legal and the financial, and have taken all of the feedback and basically modified their presentations overnight to see that they're, to reflect the feedback. I mean, that should be a large part of the learning process here. So, okay.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you for being here for us.
Good treatment.
I'm gonna get my Band-Aids for you guys.
This is what goes on as first year law students. Does that mean you want to go to law school?
It's very true.
Right?
It's very, actually, yes, by the male professors, yes.
No, by the